All right. Hello, everyone. Patrick here of the Daily Ember with another Saturday live stream. I've got a few articles set up to go over here, and we're trying to get Trey on from We the Resistance. I sent him a link. He's out currently doing some grocery shopping, but we talked about getting him on here. So if he accepts my link while we're talking, I'll add him into the stream. But like I said, I've got about 5 articles to go over. It should just take us about 45 minutes to an hour tops. I'll give you what is in the article as well as some of my own commentary. If you're not, before we go any further, let me remind you guys, if you're not already following me on Twitter, you can do that. It's just the Daily Ember, no spaces, no underscore. Also on Instagram if you're not following already. And if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel yet and you're watching this, well, go smack that subscribe button while you're here already. And also, if you'd like to help support the page and the channel, you can become a monthly donor for $5 a month on Patreon and help support independent media and voices, because independent media is under attack. Julian Assange is under arrest for exposing United States war crimes along with other countries' war crimes. Exposing the truth is not a crime. So before going further, let's go to this first article I've got here about Joe Biden recently said in an interview that he believes we need to find middle ground on climate change. So, right now we might have a shit ton of chemicals in our water, but he wants to take about 5% out of that. There might be about 300, monthly earthquakes in Oklahoma since fracking started, but he thinks maybe we can cut down to 250 and that would be okay. So Ocasio-Cortez calls Biden's reported middle ground climate policy a deal breaker. So let me get this up for you guys so you guys can see what I'm going over. Pull it up on the screen for you guys here. Boom. All right. So Ocasio-Cortez calls Biden's reported middle ground climate policy a deal breaker, which is exactly what it is. It's a deal breaker. There's nothing more we can say about this. So Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York on Friday criticized a middle ground climate plan. Reported what just happened? We got an ad. The Hill just hit me with an ad out of nowhere. Look at that. But anyways, back where we were. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on Friday criticized a middle ground climate plan reportedly in the works from former Vice President Joe Biden's presidential campaign, calling it a deal breaker for the party's progressives. Biden has not yet publicly released a proposal to combat climate change, and aides have pushed back following a Reuters report about a middle ground proposal, arguing that his forthcoming plan was being discharacterized. But several 2020 presidential rivals and environmental groups have latched onto the story and blasted his reported plans, with Ocasio-Cortez joining those voices on Friday afternoon. This is a deal breaker. There is no middle ground with climate denial and delay, tweeted Ocasio-Cortez, a freshman lawmaker who has championed the Democrats' more liberal Green New Deal legislation. Blaming blue-collar Americans as the main opponents to bold climate policy is gas lobbyist 101, she continued. We're not going to solve the climate crisis with this lack of leadership. Our kids' lives are at stake. Biden's campaign pushed back earlier in the day after a Reuters report that said that the former president, vice president, was working on an alternative climate policy to Ocasio-Cortez's Green New Deal, like most other centrist Democrats are. They're not latching on to helping make and shaping up the Green New Deal. Instead, they're going and finding a way to keep helping their fossil fuel lobbyist donors in charge, which earlier this year, we saw for 2 months the DNC said they would no longer accept fossil fuel donations, correct? That lasted 2 months before they reeled that back. Tom Perez was like, fuck that. We're going to take fossil fuel money again and let them decide what policies we're going to push. So the outlet reported that Biden's plan would focus on technology and regulations that limit emissions from burning of fossil fuels rather than fully transitioning America's energy grid toward renewable energy sources. Biden himself appeared to address the report on Twitter, promising more details about the plan in coming days. I'm proud to have been one of the first to introduce climate change legislation. What I fought for in 1986 is more important now than ever. Climate change is an extraterrestrial threat, he wrote. So Joe Biden was picked by Obama, reminder, to help get the white Republican vote. That's the only thing. Joe Biden isn't even Republican light. Joe Biden is a Republican running on a Democratic ticket. There's nothing about his policies that he's fought for. He pushed the 1989 crime bill, which was an absolutely disaster. He's since taken money from fossil fuel industries, and now he's calling for middle ground on climate change. The only people calling for middle ground on climate change are people taking money from fossil fuel industries, and that is why we need to cut out any form of corporate money in our political system if we want to have the people's voice actually be represented, which we are continuing to see is not the case since Citizens United passed, and we have seen dark money influence our politics even more since. So the vice president knows how high the stakes are, a spokesman said for his campaign, argued in response to the reuters report and criticism from progressives on Friday, as President Biden would enact a bold policy to tackle climate change in a meaningful and lasting way, and will be discussing the specifics of that plan in the near future, Biden spokesman TJ Duclos added. Any assertions otherwise are not accurate. His campaign's communications director, Bill Russo, added to the denials by tweeting a post that simply read, "Reuters got it wrong," which, that's just as simple as you can get with that. That's just Donald Trump 101. Fake news. They're liars. Ocasio-Cortez has previously come out against other climate proposals offered by members of her party that, in her view, either insignificantly deal with carbon emissions or put off the deadline for reaching zero carbon emissions, which we are starting to see multiple countries across the globe pick up. They are working to combat the rise in carbon emissions that we are putting out. We also need to look at tackling big agriculture when we're talking about fossil fuels and climate change, because big agriculture is a bigger lead and cause of climate change than the fossil fuel industry. Factory farms. Sorry. In April, she criticized a plan offered by former Rep. Beto O'Rourke, who is running for the 2020 Democratic presidential nomination as well. As we know, one of them, 25, I think we now have in the race. Now, personally, I think we need to have more aggressive timelines than that, to be honest, the Congresswoman told The Hill at that time, referring to his deadline for reaching net zero emissions being set at 2050. I think that the science and the IPCC report shows exactly what we need, and our legislation needs to be in line with that, she added, referring to a climate assessment published by the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change that said we had about a decade left before we could stop or see more disasters coming caused by climate change. So this isn't things we can continue pushing off anymore. You can say we can't do anything. Sure, that's easy. That's easy if you just want to roll over and not try to change your lifestyle because it's too hard. You might have to give up some stuff. But in the long run, for future generations, for the future overall, you should probably get with it and stop being a sociopath and just thinking about yourself and those that are directly related to you instead of the big picture of those within the community. There's no community without unity. So that's all I have for you guys on this article. As always, I'll give you more as I learn more. But now the next one I've got here, pull it up for you, is talking about how Singapore, sorry here, if it'll load for me, powering up clean energy on Semakau, which is in Singapore for those that don't know, because personally, I wasn't aware exactly where the location was either when I first read this article. So we'll open this up. We'll look at see what other countries around the world are trying to do to combat climate change. Today, we had 183 countries sign on to a United Nations resolution to combat plastic pollution. The United States, of course, was one of the only countries not to sign on to the deal because fuck us. So as this loads up, we'll get into this. And just a reminder, if you're just hopping in to watch this stream, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at the Daily Ember, and you can support the page and channel on Patreon at patreon.com/thedailyember. So once again, once this loads up here, we'll get the ball rolling on this next article. There we go. powering up clean energy on Semakau. So this is from SingaporeTimes.com. Semakau Island might be known for being Singapore's only landfill site, but it is also producing 100% clean energy to power a fish farm there. More than 9,500 square meters of solar panels located there, coupled with a wind turbine, can power up to 350 four-room housing board units for a year. So let me repeat this again. More than 9,500 square meters of solar panels located there, coupled with a wind turbine, can power up to 350 individual four-room housing board units for a year, with a total output of 1.5 megawatts at peak capacity. Now, since the end of February, the deep sea fish farm owned by Barramundi Asia on the island has been running on 100% clean energy harnessed from different renewable energy sources with an energy integration system. The Renewable Energy Integration Demonstrator Singapore, a project initiated by Nanyang Technological University, is the largest system of interconnected microgrids in Southeast Asia. Microgrids are used to help generate power in remote areas where it might be difficult to build transmission lines and travel with wires. The central hub of the Reed system draws energy from microgrids, which are powered by various sources such as wind turbines and solar panels, and redistributes any excess energy unused by one microgrid to another microgrid. Now, by integrating multiple renewable energy sources, which are heavily dependent on conditions of nature, the system is able to help generate power more consistently. The first of its kind in Southeast Asia, the microgrid system serves as a platform for companies to test research projects that are powered by renewable sources of energy in real-world conditions. To date, the university has set up partnerships with 30 local and international companies for the REEDS project, including British turbine supplier Rolls-Royce and French corporations Engie and Schneider Electric. 4 out of the 8 microgrids are currently up and running. So long-term here, like it says, they halfway there. They plan on having 8 full microgrids, which is amazing. You don't see this going on really in any other country pushing to try this experiment. Miss Romaine Mingine, project manager at French electric utility company EDF, which opened its lab on the island 5 years ago, said Singapore is a suitable location for the company to test its technologies for electric-powered cars in hot and humid conditions, which can be tough for electric equipment. What is really interesting for us here is Singapore is the tropical environment, he said. If the batteries work in Singapore, basically they will work everywhere else in the world. The main driver for us coming here was really to have a tough environment to play with and to toughen our technologies. Senior Parliamentary Secretary for Trade and Industry, Tan Wu Meng, who toured the Reed's site yesterday, said that Semakau Island was a tough environment for technology because of its remoteness, but it has been turned into an opportunity in the case of the Reed's project, as companies can test their solutions away from built-up areas, added Dr. Tan. Mr. Lim Hong Leung, program manager at NTU's Energy Research Institute, which is running the project, said that several new wind turbines will be added by the end of the year to the existing one on the island. He added that 2 tidal generators currently undergoing test runs offshore near St. John's Island and Sentosa Island will also be used at the Reed site in the future, which I'm glad they mentioned the tidal generators right there, because that's something I've been talking about with people in my posts in the comments about recently. I'm not sure how they hold up with hurricanes. Clearly, that's something we need to look at, because as climate change gets worse, the hurricane seasons and storms will only continue to get stronger. They will go further inland because of the rising waters and so forth. But the tidal generators is something we should be looking at. If we can harness the power from the waves within the ocean, as well as using solar power and wind power, there is no reason for us to be running on coal anymore. I believe it was the UK just officially ran on 100% coal for like 3 months or something for the first time since 1989 or something like that. So it's possible. Countries are doing this. that aren't bought and owned by fossil fuel industries, unlike the United States. There's a reason why we backed out of the Paris Climate Agreement. There's a reason why we don't support half the climate change battles that the rest of the countries in the world are trying to fight. Because we are still allowing corporate lobbyists to run our politicians, and we need to end that. We need to elect people that aren't going to take foreign lobbying money, any sort of lobbyist money, because lobbying is just legal bribery. That's what it is. Anywhere else you go, if a company gives a politician money in the UK, in Switzerland or something, that's not lobbying, that's bribery in their country. The United States, we twisted it. We made a new thing. It's not really new. We just changed the wording and description to make it seem like it was legal. So that's all I have for you guys on this article. Again, as always, I'll give you more as I learn more, because right now we need to be focusing on renewable energies and different ways to harness this energy so we can work on combating climate change, and as well as the carbon emissions we are putting out. We need to find a way to actually combat this, whether it be taking the small steps within your own house to cutting back your meat consumption, to finding out if you're wasting energy throughout your house, finding ways to cut back. These are things. If you're driving around wasting gas, you're just burning carbon emissions for no reason. Don't do it. So let's go into this next article here, right? About how you might have seen it in Rhode Island. I shared an article, it was an article about how in Rhode Island they were cutting back, giving out free meals to students who had had debt that couldn't pay their lunches. As well as there's another one, I think it was in New Jersey. They were holding people's graduation hostage because they couldn't pay their lunch bills. Let me tell you something. If these kids can't pay their lunch bills, there's a good chance that that lunch meal is probably the only meal that they are guaranteed they are getting today. So if you are cutting that out and then you're going to hold them hostage for graduation because they can't pay possibly, a $50 lunch bill, that is going to affect their whole life because they couldn't pay off a lunch debt. And these are things that people don't understand what systematic racism is. If you look at school suspensions, you look at school expulsions, people of color are more likely to get suspended and expelled than any other person. We've seen this. It's facts. The statistics are out there. We can go pull it up. I can do a whole nother stream looking at systematic racism across our country and what different parts, from the policing to the school system. There is so much going on. Public housing, everywhere. It is happening. So let's open this on up so we can take a dive into, the American dream, as we call it, of not being given food as a human right. This one's coming from thehill.com also. There we go. There's our good man, the CEO. Chobani CEO offers to pay student lunch debts in Rhode Island school district. Now, which is fantastic. I always say this. It's great seeing corporations, CEOs, rich people, go out, donate money to causes that need help. But we pay taxes for education. We pay taxes for schooling. Why should we be relying on corporations and the top 1% to pay stuff that our taxes are technically supposed to be taken care of? Again, we always find ways to praise the rich people when they do the littlest to get rich. And yet we praise them for these little things where we shouldn't need them to do this. This shouldn't be something we are like, oh, we need some rich person to come pay for this. No. We pay taxes. Our tax money should be going to this. But the other thing is with that taxes is the top 1% also are not taxed high enough, so they have this extra money that they can just throw around and help with, which if more of these people went out, donated their money to charities, put their money that they got from tax breaks back into their businesses to help job growth, yeah, that'd be fantastic. But that's just not the case of what's happening. Now, Chobani CEO Hamadi Yolkaya offered to pay off the lunch debts of students in a Rhode Island school district after the district received backlash earlier this week, saying that students who owned lunch money would only be served cold sun, butter, and jelly sandwiches until their balances were paid. No child should be facing anything like this, Yolkaya said in a video shared on Twitter on Thursday afternoon. I know it breaks our hearts, it breaks many people's hearts, and we need to step up. We'll take care of the school's bills because everybody at Chobani was heartbroken, and they're stepping up and they're going to do something about it, he continued. But it's just a small one. We need everywhere and around the country to eliminate this for all forever. According to the Providence Journal, the yogurt giant donated nearly $50,000 to Warwick Public Schools District in Rhode Island on Thursday to help pay off the students' lunch debts. Ulakela's message comes days after the school districts first came under fire and scrutiny for a new policy that it announced when, as we said earlier, they would only get peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. At the time, a number of parents and social media users criticized the school district on social media, saying its new policy could shame students and families who may be struggling to cover the cost of school lunches. After several days of backlash and a growing GoFundMe campaign, the school district later announced that it had decided it would forgo its new policy of withholding hot lunches from students with debts, according to the Journal. So, again, we see GoFundMe popping up. GoFundMe, it's America's healthcare currently, and it's also helping anybody in poverty. So right now, as he said, we need to stop this forever and always. We should not be allowing this to be some sort of punishment. We shouldn't be punishing people for being poor. Did the people under the poverty line, was it their fault that the wages remained stagnant while the inflation continued to rise and CEOs' bonuses kept getting bigger each year? Was it the poverty line's fault that we keep seeing the welfare check go bigger for corporations and the budget get cut for the working class welfare? Because if you look at it right now, in America, we have more corporate welfare than welfare to people within our community. We give more of our tax dollars away to corporations and CEOs than people within our own communities. And these corporations, they're not going and investing back in their job or in their companies for job growth. They're replacing jobs with AI and other forms of automation. We've seen it happen. Microsoft, Goodyear, Amazon, did I say Microsoft, Apple, they all paid zero in income taxes, right? Zero in income taxes last year, yet they all got tax refunds. So how the hell do you get a tax refund when you pay nothing in taxes? Who's paying for that? I'll tell you who. The working class is paying for those tax bills. We continue to give free rides to the top 1%, and they keep continuing to get richer while the poor gets poorer. So that's all I got for you on that article. As always, we've got racial issues and class issues. We've got class warfare covered up with racial tensions. There is racial tensions in this country. There's always been. But we need to start taking on the class warfare in this country, because if we don't, it's going to get too late and we're not going to be able to do anything. The poverty line is just going to continue to grow and grow. So now the next article I have, goes into how about 13 million United States children are living below the poverty line, revealed a RIPE group in their newest report. So this one comes from The Guardian. I'll open this up, load it up, go over it. Again, welfare in America. We keep cutting welfare to our communities while we give it away to corporations. So the Children's Defense Fund says doubling federal minimum wage and increased tax credits would cut moral travesty on child poverty. So a leading children's rights group has called for a doubling of the federal minimum wage and wider access to housing subsidies to end the moral travesty of millions of children living in poverty while the wealthiest Americans continue to get tax cuts. The Children Defense Fund, CDF, said in a new report that about 13 million American children are currently living in homes with income below the poverty line, depriving many of a decent education and a proper nutrition and putting them at risk of homelessness and violence. 2/3 of those living in poverty are children of color. No surprise, systematic racism, again, as I mentioned in the last article, is everywhere. It is everywhere. No child should have to worry where their next meal will come from or whether she will have to or whether she will have a place to sleep at night in the wealthiest nation on earth. Yet more than 12.8 million children in America, about 1 in 5, live in poverty and face these harsh realities every day, said the report, Ending Child Poverty Now. The CDF said poverty stacks the odds against children for life, affecting their development and their opportunities. About 1 in 3 live in families where at least one adult is a full-time but often poorly paid job. So here we have a nice chart breaking it down by state. In 2017, child poverty rates in the United States were the highest in Louisiana at 28% and the lowest in New Hampshire at 10.3%. Now, if you notice this chart right here, most of the people below the poverty line are below the Rust Belt, the Bible Belt, which is what? Mostly red states, which have continuously been fighting a war to cut welfare and give more welfare to the top 1% instead of those struggling within the communities. So it's just something I'd like to point out here. You can go up and look this up outside of just The Guardian. Countless studies will show you this same result, that these southern deep red states are all cutting welfare, and yet their poverty line continues to grow. It doesn't go down. Nope. It's going up. The organization calls for sweeping action by Washington. It said that a combination of more than doubling the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour within 5 years, increased tax credits, and widening child care subsidies would cut child poverty by more than half, increasing access to housing subsidies to low-income families on less than 150% of the poverty level of $25,000 a year for a family of four would alone lift 2 million children out of poverty. Now, child poverty is an urgent and preventable crisis. Solutions to child poverty in our nation already exist. We just need to invest in and expand them. The report said benefits like nutrition assistance, housing vouchers, and tax credits helped lift nearly 7 million children out of poverty back in 2017. But millions of children were left behind due to the inadequate funding, eligibility restrictions, and low wages. We can and we must do more. The report estimates the cost of the measures at $52 billion, just 1.4% of federal spending overall. So if we take just a little bit, if we take that 1.4% even from the military budget and put it towards this, that would help greatly. This is a bargain for our nation, which in 2017 spent nearly $2 trillion on tax cuts for the wealthiest individuals and corporations can easily afford. Every dollar invested in reducing child poverty will return at least $7 to our economy, the report said. The question is not whether we have the knowledge or resources to end child poverty, but whether we have the moral decency and political will. Mary Lee Allen, the CDF's policy director, said she encouraged that there appears to be greater discussion about poverty at a federal level and that some states are starting to take the initiative. I think that what gives us encouragement is that we see some action that we haven't seen in the past. A number of states have approved increases in the minimum wage, she said. In a country as rich as ours, there's no excuse. There's no reason. It's a moral travesty. Again, they've said this throughout the thing. This is all, it's not about should we, it is, are we going to have morals? Are we going to do what is right? Are we going to make sure that we don't let children starve? We don't let children go homeless on the streets? LGBTQ children, for example, are more likely to be homeless in the United States. We see that across the country. We need to make sure we are taking care of future generations, because if we don't, I said this in a stream, I believe it was yesterday on Instagram when we were talking. China, we saw, they recently started, I think it was China exactly, maybe not. But you weren't able to have more than one kid, and they had a problem with their workforce because the workforce started to get too old. They didn't have enough young blood out there to help take care of some of the jobs that they needed younger people to do, correct? So if right now we see, millennials like us not reproducing and having kids because we can't afford it, I believe we are going to see ourselves have the same issue as China did, where the workforce is going to be too old and we're not going to have enough younger people to work some of the jobs that, require people who are younger. So that's all I have, guys, on this story. If you want to learn more, go to the Guardian website. You got some links here that'll take you to learn about low-income family sources, as well as some other stuff here for the direct link to the CDF report. But as always, I'll give you more as I learn more. But we need to find a way that we're actually going to help and combat climate change and poverty. Um, sorry, I climate change popped back up when we got back to this page, so came to mind. So now let's move on to this next story I have for you guys about how the Pentagon approved a transfer of $1.5 billion to Trump border wall from the Afghan forces, along with taking the money from other accounts. So let's load this one up and see what hot mess this is, correct? Again, if anybody's just joining in and watching the stream, make sure you hit that subscribe button, follow me on Twitter, and also follow me on Instagram if you're not. It's the Daily Ember, no underscores, no spaces, plain and easy to find. If you're not already subscribed to the page, also make sure to hit that subscribe button. So here we have another bill, another article from The Hill about how the Pentagon approves the transfer of $1.5 billion to the Trump border wall from Afghan forces and other accounts. So before I fucking go any further into this one, right away, $1.5 billion to Trump border wall. So we transferred money from Afghan forces and other accounts of the military to go and build a southern border wall, 85 miles, I believe, is the expansion they want. Uh, for a fake crisis right now. There is no crisis at the southern border. We have a 40-year low illegal immigration through our country at the southern border. There's no fucking crisis. It's inflated. The only crisis is the one inside Donald Trump's head because the man is fucking insane. He's fucking lost it. So again, we have $1.5 billion that we can take from Afghan forces and other military budgets, but we can't use that to, have Medicare for all. We can't take that money to invest in our infrastructure or education, but we can always put up a fucking wall. So let's go here. Acting Defense Secretary, who just got put in, he's a former Boeing executive also. So, you know, to us, that's a conflict of interest. To United States politicians, it's just another day for them. Patrick Shanahan has approved the transfer of $1.5 billion from Pentagon coffers, including more than $600 million from an Afghan security forces account to build more than 120 miles of barriers along the U.S.-Mexico border, according to the Pentagon statement. Now, also, this wall where it's going through to block off the Rio Grande, uh, that affects animals. That affects the wildlife in these areas, and it's going to cause animals to drown because when that floods over there, there's going to be a wall that is preventing those animals from traveling and getting away from the flooding waters. Uh, Again, there's so much that this administration isn't taking into thought. There's also, I didn't add that to this live stream, but there's another article out there. Texas Senate, I believe it was, just approved to use herbicide at the southern border to help kill wildlife, so so border patrol agents could see across more easier instead of them having stuff to hide in. Again, the environmental impacts that will have is devastating. The animals that feed off the grass that they are killing, live in it, etc. They're not taking any of that into effect. They're just playing into more of their fear tactic bullshit. So today we reprogrammed $1.5 billion toward the construction of more than 120 miles of border barrier without impacting readiness, Shanahan said in a statement. The funds were called out from a variety of sources to include executed prior year funds, the suspension of reimbursement in Pakistan, and cost reductions in a series of contracts. The statement adds that the Defense Department is fully engaged on the crisis along our southwest border, with more than 40,000 service members and 19 aircraft there supporting the Department of Homeland Services. So not only, many people still forget, I think, since it's not in the news as much anymore, we still have 4,000 military troops down at the southern border for no fucking reason. No reason. They could be at home with their families and stuff, but instead they're at the border putting up wire and just sitting around playing hacky sack when they could be at home with their families, possibly at another job working. I don't know. They have it on the side outside of being in the service. But here we are, 4,000 troops down at the southern border, being paid to protect nothing. Again, there's no reason to have these troops down at the border. And then on top, we are burning more money by having 19 aircraft. So I'm not sure how many helicopters those are, if they have crop duster planes as well flying back and forth. So Reuters reported that the transfer would include $604 million from Afghan forces. Hold up. Yeah. Reuters reported that the transfer would include $604 million from Afghan security forces accounts, with the rest coming from Air Force programs, a chemical demilitarization program, and a retirement account, and also military dollars for Pakistan. An unnamed U.S. official told the news service that $4.9 billion was appropriated for the security forces for fiscal 2019, and that money was taken from the account as savings and contracts were found. Following news of the transfer, every Democratic member of the Senate Appropriations Defense Subcommittee and the Senate Appropriations Committee on Military Construction, Veterans Affairs, and related agencies slammed the decision in a letter to Shanahan. Now, the lawmakers worry that the latest reprogramming will come at the expense of the military's readiness. Once again, the Department of Defense has ignored decades of precedented and cooperation with Congress in carrying out a transfer of funds without regard to any consultation with the Appropriations Committee, they wrote. We are dismayed that the department has chosen to prioritize a political campaign promise over the disaster relief needs of our service members, given the finite reprogramming authority available. The letter was signed by Democratic Senators Patrick Leahy of Vermont, Dick Durbin of Illinois, Jack Reed of Rhode Island, Brian Schatz of Hawaii, Tom Udall of I forget, and I'm sorry, Pat Murray of Washington, Chris Murphy of Connecticut, Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin, and Dianne Feinstein of California, along with John Tester of Montana. I'm kind of surprised that Dianne Feinstein actually showed up and signed on to this, in all honesty. Same with Dickie Durbin here from Illinois. The United States is in the midst of peace talks with the Taliban to negotiate an end of nearly an 18-year war in Afghanistan, but those forces are struggling to maintain territory against the militant group as talks drag on. It's not reflective of anything related to our commitment. It looks less. It took less money to meet the policy commitment than we thought, a second U.S. official told Reuters. The transfer comes after the Department of Defense in March moved nearly $1 billion from counter-drug funding to pay for Trump's border wall. In addition, Trump in February reprogrammed $3.6 billion in military construction funds for the wall as part of his national emergency declaration. Shanahan told lawmakers on Wednesday that the Army Corps of Engineers is currently on contract to build about 256 miles of barrier. How you will see this materialize in the next 6 months is about 63 new miles of wall will come online. So about half a mile a day will be produced, Shanahan said during the Senate Appropriations Defense Subcommittee hearing. He also went on to note that there are now about 4,364 United States service members at the border, a mix of active duty and National Guard members. The administration plans to pull a total of $6.1 billion from Pentagon accounts for border barriers, including $2.5 billion from the counter-drug programs and $3.6 billion from military construction funds. The reallocation of the funds has angered some lawmakers on Capitol Hill who have threatened to bar the Pentagon from transferring money in the future. Senator Dick Durbin, the number 2 Senate Democrat, wrote on Twitter prior to the announcement that the Pentagon has now reprogrammed 12 times more money to the wall than the repairs at Tyndall Air Force Base destroyed by Hurricane Michael. We should put our troops first. And on top of this, it's mentioned how the National Guard is at the border also helping with the wall. We have flooding in Houston. We have flooding in North Dakota, South Dakota, across the country. We have mass flooding happening. These troops, the National Guard, could be in these states helping out with those disasters like they are there for. Not building a stupid, pointless fucking wall that a ladder is going to get someone over. Again, it's a 40-year low of illegal immigration we have currently at the southern border, and this fucking administration is still trying to pump up a false narrative that there is a crisis at the border. There isn't. There is no crisis at the border. So the prohibition included in the fiscal 2020 military construction and Veterans Affairs appropriation bill would prohibit funds from the 2015 through 2020 fiscal years from being obligated, expended, or used to design, construct, or carry out a project to construct a wall, barrier, fence, or road along the U.S. southern border. Pentagon spokesperson Tom Crossan later said in a statement that the Defense Department had notified lawmakers at Chobani after reviewing recommendations from his staff, and the Joint Staff has agreed to undertake fence replacement on 4 additional projects in and around Tucson, Arizona, El Centro, Texas, totaling 78.25 miles. And House Armed Services Committee Chairman Adam Smith told Chobani during a panel hearing in March that the Pentagon would likely lose the reprogramming authority if it moved forward with the $1 billion funding transfer. The Pentagon has yet to use military construction dollars on the wall, though it has already drawn up contracts to be paid by the $1 billion from the counter-drug accounts. So that's all I have, you guys, on this story. Again, this whole administration's tactics is based on fear, lies, and hoping you guys don't know how to use the internet to do your own research. The next story I have for you guys is going to be talking about how asylum officers are being replaced by CBP agents who are law enforcement officers. So that's going to make this a lot harder for asylum seekers to open up and talk to them, is what this is going to explain. It is from the ACLU. So let's get into this, talk about it, read it, and then we'll wrap up this live stream because I know we're about to hit that hour mark coming up, and I said we're not going to go over that. So guess what? Let's do this. And it also looks like Trey just contacted me, and it looks like I'll have to try and shoot him an invite to this stream after this again. So we'll buzz through this article, wrap up the articles here, and see if we can get Trey in. If Trey can't end up getting logged in, then we'll wrap up and end the stream. But let me just contact him here real fast and let him know what's going on, so he's just not hanging around. Yeah, hold up here. Hold up. Stand by. Stand by. Stand by. Is it gonna... Is that it? We'll just look at this after. So asylum officers are being replaced by CBP agents. Sorry, I keep switching it around on you guys. So this comes from the ACLU. This is a new article. It came out, well, not too new. It came out within the next week. It's something that I scanned over. I didn't see this. I didn't know this was something that happened. So that's why I figured I'd throw it on. I actually added this on last night as I was wrapping up putting together today's show. So like I said, this is something I've been trying to keep up on. It's very important that we pay attention to what's going on in regards to immigration with our country, because if you don't pay attention to it because it's not affecting you, then when it does start to affect you, it's going to be too late to do anything at all. So just a reminder there, if you don't do anything just because you're not being affected, you're lazy. You're lazy. You're part of the problem. And frankly, I don't want anything to do with you. So last week, President Trump issued a memorandum. I can't talk. memorandum outlining his latest wish list of ways to undermine the integrity of our nation's asylum system. Uh, Among them, was a direction to the Department of Homeland Security to change how it conducts credible fear interviews. The threshold screening interview given to thousands of asylum seekers every year. DHS is reportedly now planning to deploy Customs and Border Protection officers, enforcement agents whose mission is Let's see. Hold up here, guys. We're gonna try it. 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 I promise. If anything, here, while we're doing this, I'll go on my Twitter. I think I got a video I could show you guys. If you didn't see recently, Donald Trump at a rally, there's somebody, he was talking about the southern border crisis and immigration and such. And someone in the crowd, when he said, there's so many people, we don't know what to do, someone in the fucking crowd said to shoot him. That's right. The dude said, shoot him. We should shoot him. When he says shoot him, he's talking about that migrants coming for a better life. And Donald Trump doesn't condemn this statement, of course. Why would he? He says, you can't do that here. So the dude didn't even condemn it, just like he didn't condemn the white nationalists in Charlottesville when we saw one of his supporters run over countless protesters with a Mustang, killing one. And he was that guy. He was just actually charged for manslaughter. I forget how many counts of manslaughter he got, but that dude is in jail now. So fuck him. You know what? Here, I was talking about this earlier. This is on Twitter. It's another Hill article. This is the plastic thing I was talking about at the very start. I mentioned how the United States was one of the only countries out of 183 countries not to sign on to a plastic waste agreement. So as this loads up, I'm still waiting to hear back from Trey here. I'm going to try one more time to get him in here. We'll try. All right, let's go back to screen share for you guys. Show you what's happening. Oh. Yo, is it frozen? No, we're good. We're good. All right, we're going to switch it over now. Right here. Boom. All right. All right. All right. So here. Curious. Oh, fuck. All right. This is going to start playing right when I start talking, so hold up here. Just pause that. It's got an ad anyways. I don't get paid if I share ads on these videos. Why would I share their advertisements? So here we go. Go back up there, Hill. All right. 187 countries signed plastic waste agreement. Of course, the United States was one of the only countries in the world that didn't sign on to it. And I believe if I look into it more, probably the other countries that didn't agree to it, get some form of aid from the United States. So more so the United States, like we saw with people who don't support Israel compared to Palestine, were bullied into doing it by the United States threatening to cut aid. So let's dive in here. Nearly every country in the world agreed to a treaty aimed at limiting plastic waste pollution, but the United States was not among one of them, as it has not ratified a treaty to which the provision was added. The governments of 187 countries agreed to add plastic to the United Nations-supported Basel Convention, which regulates the transfer of certain materials between borders. The United States did not participate in the talks regarding plastic because it is one of just two countries that has not ratified the treaty, according to the TV network. Even though the United States did not ratify the treaty, its trades with countries that have approved the deal will be affected. According to ABC News, several industries will be affected by the move, including healthcare, technology, food, and fashion. It's sending a very strong political signal to the rest of the world, to the private sector, to the consumer market, that we need to do something. Rolf Payet of the United Nations Environment Program told countries have decided to do something which will translate into real action on the ground. He also said it would create a transparent and traceable system for the export and import of plastic waste. So I don't have the article on me either right now because I didn't think that I'd be talking about this one. But I believe it's about 50% of the United States for recycled plastics. Maybe it's just recyclables overall, are shipped and sold overseas. So I'm not sure if they go to that place in Singapore where I talked about earlier in this live stream. Um, I know a majority of our recyclables go over to China into those waste landfills. So you may be recycling here, but there's a good chance what you are recycling is getting sent overseas and put into a landfill. So again, United States and one other country, it doesn't mention, and two other countries, sorry, did not participate in this talk, and the United States hasn't ratified the treaty to join it. So the United States, again, falling behind on very big issues that we shouldn't be, sitting on the back burner. But, I haven't heard anything back from Trey, so I think we're going to call this live stream because, yeah, I haven't heard from him. So let's wrap this up real fast. Go show you the Twitter. Remember, guys, follow me on the Twitter if you're not already. I'm out here. I've started using this a lot more this year. We're growing up fast here on Instagram. We're at 184 followers, so that's pretty good for being on here just within the last year, I think, because Twitter has been hard for me to use. But I like it more. Been trying to use it more. The YouTube channel also, don't forget you can subscribe to me on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. I'm going to be trying to do more of these live streams, but very important. Check it out. Support independent media. If you can't, become a monthly donor, then you can still support independent media by following us, sharing our information. There we go. Sorry, I was trying to get the camera back there for a second. But like I was saying, if you can't become a monthly donor on Patreon for $5 a month, like I said earlier, that's patreon.com/the Daily Ember. Then you can still help us by sharing our posts, sharing our videos, tagging your friends in the comments. That's what helps too. Your reach helps us. So like I said, thanks for watching, guys. This has been your Daily Ember. This has been a great live stream. Thanks to everybody that's watching. If you weren't here at the start, don't worry. It'll be up after I end the stream forever. So again, thanks for watching. I'm Patrick. This has been your Daily Ember.